Have you been through a trauma and have not had the time to grieve? Have you been struggling with waves of grief on and off? Do you need tools to deal with your loss? If you're emotionally suffering, you are not alone. Keep watching this video to get the right tools and tips. Coping with grief and loss. Whatever type of loss you've suffered, there's no right or wrong way to grieve. However, by understanding the different stages and types of grief, you can find healthier ways to cope with your grief. So first, let's understand what is grief. Grief is a natural response to any loss. It's the emotional suffering or pain that we experience when something or someone we love is taken away from us. Often, the pain of loss can feel very overwhelming. You may experience all kinds of difficult and unexpected emotions, from shock to anger to disbelief to shame to guilt and profound sadness. The pain of grief can also disrupt your physical health, making it very difficult to sleep, eat, or even think right. These are all normal reactions to your loss, and the more significant the loss, the more intense your grief will be. I have in the recent past lost 3 family members, and I want to share with you coping with the loss of someone or something you love is one of life's biggest challenges. I feel you're not alone. You may associate grieving with the death of a loved one, which is often the cause of the most intense type of grief. But any loss can cause grief, and I want to share with you, including divorce or relationship breakup, loss of health, losing a job, loss of financial stability, a miscarriage, retirement, death of a pet, loss of maybe a cherished dream, a loved one's serious illness, loss of a close friendship, loss of safety after a traumatic experience, selling the family home. Even subtle losses in life can trigger a sense of deep grief. For example, you may grieve after moving away from home. Let's say you're in college, graduating from college, or changing jobs. All of these are valid. Whatever your loss, it's personal to you. So don't feel ashamed about how you feel or how your feelings are showing up, or believe that it's somehow only appropriate to grieve only certain things. If the person, animal, relationship or situation was significant to you, I'm here to tell you it's only normal to grieve the loss you're experiencing, and your feelings are valid. Whatever the cause of your grief, there are healthy ways to cope with the pain in time, and this can ease your sadness and help you come to terms with your loss and find new meaning and eventually move on with your life. Let me talk a little about the grief of losing a loved one. Whether it's a close friend, a spouse, partner, a relative, a parent, a child, few things are as painful as losing someone you love. After such a significant loss, life may never seem quite the same again. However, in time, you will learn to live with the sorrow. You can ease your sorrow and start to look at the future and eventually come to terms with your loss in a positive way. This is exactly what I'm doing in my current situation. Bereavement, grieving the loss of a loved one. The grieving process, grieving is a highly individualistic experience. There is no right or wrong way to grieve. Please understand. How you grieve depends on many factors, including your personality, your coping style, your life experiences, your personal beliefs, your faith, and how significant the loss was to you. Inevitably, the grieving process takes time. Healing happens gradually. It's not a linear process. It cannot be forced or hurried. This is what we do wrong. And there is no normal timetable for grieving. You own your own timetable. Some people start to feel better in weeks, in few days. For others, the grieving process is measured in years. Whatever your grief experience, it's important to be patient and compassionate with yourself and allow the process to unfold naturally. Few myths and facts about grief and grieving I want to share with you. Myth: the pain will go away faster if you ignore it. Fact: trying to ignore, dismiss your pain, or keep it from surfacing will only make it worse in the long run. For real healing, it is necessary to face your grief and actively deal with. So face it and feel it. Myth: it's important to be strong in the face of any loss. Fact: feeling sad, frightened, or lonely is a normal reaction to any loss. Crying doesn't mean that you are weak. You don't need to protect your family or friends by putting up a brave face and telling yourself and others, "Oh, I need to be strong." Showing your true feelings can help them and you. Next myth: if you don't cry, it means you aren't sorry about the loss. Fact: crying is a very, very, very normal response to sadness, but it's not the only one. Those who don't cry may feel the same just as deeply as others. For example, this is me. They may simply have other ways of showing it. Next myth: grieving should last about a year. Fact: there is no specific time frame for your grieving. How long it takes differs from person to person. Next myth: moving on with your life means forgetting about your loss. Fact: moving on means you've accepted your loss with grace, but it's not the same as forgetting about your loss. You can move on with your life and keep the memory of someone or something that you lost as an important part of you. In fact, as we move through life, these memories can become more and more and more integral to defining the people we are. Next, how do we deal with the grieving process? While grieving a loss is an inevitable part of our lives, there are healthy ways to help cope with your pain and come to terms with your grief and eventually find a way to pick up the pieces, your broken pieces, and move on with grace and gratitude. Number 1, acknowledge your pain. Number 2, accept that grief can trigger many different and unexpected emotions. It's absolutely okay. Number 3, understand that your grieving process will be unique to you. Number 4, seek out face-to-face support from people who care about you. Number 5, support yourself emotionally by taking care of your well-being. Number 6, recognize the difference between grief and depression. So what are the 5 stages of grief? In 1969, psychiatrist Elizabeth Ross introduced what became known as the 5 stages of grief. These stages of grief were based on her studies of the feelings of patients facing terminal illness, but many people have generalized them to other types of negative life changes and losses as well, such as the death of a loved one or a breakup. So the 5 stages of grief. Denial. This can't be happening to me. Happens to most of us. Anger. Why is this happening to me? Who is to blame? Bargaining. Make this not happen and in return I will ... Deep sadness. I'm too sad to do anything. And then acceptance. I'm at peace with what has happened and I'm in acceptance and surrender. If you're experiencing any of these emotions following a loss, it may help to know that your reaction is normal, it's natural, and that you'll heal in time, as I am too in my family's tragedy. However, not everyone who grieves goes through all of these stages, and that's okay too. Contrary to popular belief, you do not have to go through each stage in order for you to heal. In fact, some people resolve their grief without going through any of these stages. For example, I did not feel any anger or denial. I went on to sadness, to acceptance. If you do go through these stages of grief, you probably won't experience them in a neat sequential order. So don't worry about what you should be feeling and putting too much pressure on yourself or which stage you were supposed to be in. Grief can be a roller coaster. It's not a linear process. Instead of a series of stages, we might also think of the grieving process as a roller coaster full of ups and downs and highs and low, and that's okay too. It's okay not to be okay and feel sadness and anger one day and feel acceptance and anger one day. Like many roller coasters, the ride tends to be rougher in the beginning. The lows may be deeper and longer. I'm here to tell you, whatever is your wave, learn to ride it without fighting it. The difficult periods should become less intense and shorter as time goes by, but it takes time to work through the loss. Even years for some after a loss, especially at special events such as a family wedding or the birth of a child, we may still experience a strong sense of grief because it's reminding you of your loss. So what are some of the symptoms of grief? While loss affects people in different ways, many of us experience the following symptoms when we're grieving. Just remember that almost anything that you experience in the early stages of grief is again normal, including feelings like you are going crazy, feelings like you're in a bad dream, or questioning your religious or spiritual beliefs as well. Emotional symptoms of grief: shock and disbelief. Right after a loss, it can be hard to accept what happened. You may feel numb, have trouble believing that the loss really is happening to you, or even deny the truth. If a pet or someone you love has died, for example, you may experience expecting them to just show up, even though you know they're gone. This happens to most of us. Deep sadness. Profound sadness is probably the most universally experienced symptoms of grief. You may have feelings of emptiness, despair, yearning, or deep loneliness. You may also cry a lot or feel emotionally unstable. Guilt. You may regret or feel guilty about things you did or didn't say or do. This is also normal. You may feel guilty about certain feelings. Feeling relieved when a person died after a long, difficult illness. For example, you may even feel guilty for not doing more to prevent your loss, even if it was completely out of your control, it was completely out of your hands. Fear. A significant loss can trigger a host of worries and fears. If you lost your partner, your job, or your home, just to give you an example, you may experience intense anxiety, helplessness, hopelessness, or insecurity about the future. You may even have panic attacks. The death of a loved one can trigger fears about your own mortality, or facing life without that person, or the responsibilities you now face alone. Anger. Even if the loss was nobody's fault, you may experience anger and resentment. If you lost a loved one, you may be angry with yourself, or maybe God, the doctors, or even the person who died for abandoning you. You may feel the need to blame someone for the injustice that has just happened to you. There are physical symptoms of grief as well. We often think of grief as a strictly emotional and mental process, but I'm here to tell you that grief often also involves physical symptoms that I want you to be aware of, including fatigue, nausea, lowered immunity, weight loss or weight gain, aches and pains, and insomnia. Types of grief. Since the experience of grieving following the loss of someone or something important to you tends to be very, very unique to you, it's very difficult to sometimes label any type of grief as either abnormal or normal. However, there are types of grief that fall outside the expected symptoms and reactions that I have described to you. These include anticipatory grief. As the name suggests, anticipatory grief develops before a significant loss occurs rather than after. If a loved one is, let's say, terminally ill, for example, you have an aging pet, or you know that your retirement or job loss is imminent, you may start grieving your loss before it has fully unfolded. This also happens to some of us. Like conventional grief, anticipatory grief can involve a mix of confusing emotions, particularly anger. I have seen in my practice Some people even equate it to giving up hope and refuse to allow themselves to grieve before their loss has even occurred. However, anticipatory grief can also give you the chance to prepare for your loss, resolve any unfinished business, or say your goodbyes. For example, disenfranchised grief. This grief can occur when your loss is devalued, stigmatized, or cannot be openly mourned. Some people may minimize the loss of a job or a pet or a friendship, for example, as something that's not worth grieving over. You may feel stigmatized if you suffered a miscarriage or lost a loved one to suicide. This kind of grief can also occur when your relationship to a deceased is not recognized. Some people may consider it inappropriate to grieve for a work colleague, a classmate, or a neighbor, for example. As a close friend or same-sex partner, you may be denied the same sympathy and understanding as a blood relative. This can make it even more difficult to come to terms with your loss and navigate the whole grieving process. There is also something that is called complicated grief. The pain at a significant loss may never completely disappear, but it should ease up over time. They say time is a big healer because we learn to live with the loss. When it doesn't and it keeps you from resuming your daily life and your relationships, it may be a sign of complicated grief, and that's when I need you to take action. These are the signs. Complicated grief usually arises again from the death of a loved one, where the loss has left you stuck in a state of bereavement. You may be unable to accept your loved one has gone. Search for them in familiar places. You experience intense longing, or even feel that life isn't worth living. If you are experiencing complicated grief, or a loved one is, and the pain from your loss remains unresolved, it's very important to reach out for support and take action. Take the necessary steps that will enable you or your loved one to heal. Taking care of yourself as you grieve. When you're grieving, it's most important than ever before to take care of your own well-being. The stress of a major loss can quickly deplete your energy and your emotional reserves. Looking after your physical and emotional needs will help you get through this difficult time. And what I need you to do is, what I'm also doing is, face your feelings. Feel your feelings. If you try to suppress your grief, if you try to avoid it, it will not help you heal. In order to heal, you have to acknowledge the pain. Trying to avoid feelings of sadness and loss only prolongs the grieving process. So I want you to face your grief. Unresolved grief can also lead to later complications such as anxiety and depression and substance abuse and maybe health problems. Express your feelings in a open and honest way. Even if you're not able to talk about your loss with everyone, it can help you to, let's say, write down your thoughts and feelings maybe in a journal, or speak to that one person who will understand your feelings, or speak to a coach or counselor. This will help you release your emotions. You can maybe make a scrapbook or volunteer for a cause related to your loss. That's also very healing. Try to maintain your hobbies and interests. There's a comfort in routine and getting back to the activities that bring you joy and connect you closer to others, which can help you come to terms with your loss and aid the grieving process. Doing things that you love without feeling the guilt. That's how you heal. Don't let anyone tell you how to feel, and don't judge yourself for feeling any of your feelings. Your grief is your own, it's unique to you. No one else can tell you when it's time to move on or get over it. Let yourself feel whatever you feel without embarrassment, without judgment. I'm here to tell you it's okay to be angry, to yell at the heavens, or to cry or not to cry. It's also okay to laugh, to find moments of joy and remember your loved ones with a smile, and to let go only when you are ready. Looking after your mind and body, because the two are connected, is very important. When you feel healthy, physically, emotionally, psychologically, you will feel better and you'll be able to cope better. Combat your stress and fatigue by getting enough sleep, eating right and exercising. Don't use alcohol to drug or other drugs to numb your feelings, to lift your mood artificially. Plan ahead for grief triggers. Anniversaries, holidays, and important milestones can reawaken painful memories and feelings and open up past wounds. Be prepared for the emotional roller coaster and know that it's completely normal. You can plan ahead by making sure that you're not alone. For example, by making your loss open to others, by sharing your grief. What has been your biggest loss? What have you done to cope with it? Please tell us in the comment below. Our family just experienced the mother of all tragedies a month ago, where we lost 3 family members. And because we are grieving together as a family, our supportive relationships are our greatest healing balm. And we are allowing every family member to experience whatever rainbow of emotions they are experiencing. It's okay to feel angry, it's okay to feel sad, it's okay even to be in denial, because your grieving process is unique to you and we all have to be respectful of that. And that's why I do the work that we do at Happiness is Love, because I believe that when we share our stories of our pain, our struggles, our storms, that's when we help ourselves and others heal. We learn from each other's pain and we grow together in love. Stay tuned for more. We are here for you. If you're struggling with any aspect of your life, please reach out to us at Happiness is Love, because we care and we are there.